Welcome to episode 163, still quarantined up, of Sutton Impact Family Style. I'm Jason.
And I'm Bill. And our goal today is to give you some of our favorite viewing over the years. It's all accessible to you now on demand.
Yeah.
And, I think that's the beauty of this, is that all these things, some of these things are like 10, 15 years old. And you can go back and you can watch these and stream them, and it gives you something, a respite from what's going on out there. So we're going to try and each do 10. And if we still think we've got a lot on the list, we'll probably continue it next week and stay with our entertainment theme until there are sports to talk about.
Yes.
Although I did yesterday watch the rebroadcast of the 2004 Masters, which CBS did, which I thought was a really good thing. And what blew me away is before that they did the 1975 Masters, then the 2014. And it just amazing the difference in the quality of video, even between 2004 and now. But between 1975 and now, it was almost frightening that I used to think that was a great picture. I mean, I actually thought I needed glasses when I was trying to watch the 1975 stuff.
Wow.
So it's been wild. The XFL dropped this week.
Yep.
Which, I have to say, I was more impressed with the XFL than I thought I was going to be. I mean, and I don't think it would have survived all next year, but I think it would have went in next year in some new markets. And, I thought they had some great innovations. I thought they had some really good teams. I thought they had some really bad teams.
Yeah.
And that's what you're going to get when you do a draft like that with unknown players and people just coming in. But I'm sad.
Yeah.
Have you been watching the NBA 2K?
Not much, no.
Yeah, I can't get into that. But, I'll probably talk to Dan about it later on. I know that they broadcast on ESPN the League of Legends Championship was on yesterday afternoon as well.
Yeah. And I pitched that 3 years ago. And this year.
Okay.
And last year, that they should do it.
Yeah. I mean, just trying to figure it out. I mean, I'm really enjoying The Plot Against America right now, which is a current series I'm watching. I'm definitely going to watch the TMZ 1 hour on the Tiger King tomorrow night.
Sure.
And I don't know if that makes me sick or not, but I guess, the TMZ people are going to have unanswered questions. And I need to give them credit. They do dig, and they dig well.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. We'll see what they come up with.
Well, there's no body. So ultimately,
No.
what can you prove?
Yeah.
We've all watched
The
enough
other
TV.
thing I wanted to comment on is I watched Saturday Night Live at home last night.
And how was that?
It was what you would expect. I mean, everybody was doing their bits, in isolation from their place. But the weekend update with Michael Che and Colin Jost was still really, really good.
Yeah, those guys are just...
They were like FaceTiming or Zooming, whatever they were doing. And they had Alec Baldwin on as Trump. And Trump made a comment about Tiger King. She definitely fed the Tigers. So, I mean, it was capitalizing on everything else that's been there. But, I mean, it was a great attempt. Tom Hanks was the host. And I thought he did a good job. And, it was what you expect. It's hard to watch those shows without an audience because you have nothing to react to. As if you're the actor, you're presenting it. There's nothing to react to.
True.
And so I think there's always something that loses a little bit from there. But the Colin Jost and Michael Che's grandmother died, and he told Colin Jost that he wanted to do that thing where he gives him a joke that he hasn't seen before he has to read it.
Yeah.
Because he knows his grandmother would like it. And so he gave him one. It was harsh. And then he started laughing. He goes, my grandmother before watching this show.
Yeah, I think that's the best bit they've done in 40 years.
I think that is by far the best. I think they're my favorite weekend update team ever.
Well, I've seen a few interviews with them, and they seem like they've got some they're legitimate friends, which I think really,
They are, and they really push each other. They've got really good rapport. And it's funny, and I mean, they don't hold back, so I mean, it's pretty good.
Yeah. Well, I just finished the second pointless season of Big Little Lies. Very disappointing second season. Great first season.
What? Second season what?
Big Little Lies.
Oh, okay, yeah, it was.
I thought Meryl Streep was.
Go for Meryl Streep.
Yeah, she was fantastic, but I mean, the tone of the show changed. The plot didn't really. It didn't feel like there was a need for any of the entire second season.
No.
But and I mean, they lost the Greek chorus. They lost the kind of smarmy humor, like all the other. I mean, despite the fact that the show about murder, like I mean, you had a lot of like satire and everything else. And this became like a pure drama.
And we've seen that before, where something's really successful, and they rush to throw something else, like the second season of True Detective, which we're going to get into.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it was too rushed. We had something that was really, really well done. It was really, really popular, and then you wanted to capitalize on it, but you weren't prepared for it, and so you threw something together, and it was just, it was a nice vehicle for Meryl Streep. She played the character really well, but it was not needed. I mean, it ended in a good spot. They should have let it be gone.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, I'm going to start off with my first of my series.
Okay.
And I'm going to start with Mad Men that was on HBO. And I think Mad Men is one of the best series ever put together.
Mad Men was AMC.
AMC. I'm sorry. Okay, AMC. I just love that show.
It's a fantastic show.
It was just a phenomenal, great acting, great casting, great subplots. I like how they wove current events in and out. I like how they evolved. I like that you had good guys that became bad guys and bad guys that became good guys. I like all those things. I like John Hamm as an actor. I like the cast. John Slattery, he took on some really crazy things. I mean, there was blackface in there. There was the invention of the Xerox machine. There was the Kennedy-Nixon debates and campaign. I just was mesmerized by it. I thought it was some of the best TV I've ever seen.
That was on my list as well, so I won't list it, but again, I'll echo most of the things you said. Like, it was just absolutely a fantastic show. Start, middle to end. It had a nice full arc. You felt like it was...
It really did. It really did. And it kept you wanting for more, and they did a good job. I think it ended well.
I think they did great, yeah. You got, like I said, you got closure. You didn't get that extra 2 seasons of, it's a popular show, let's just keep going, which you never want to have.
No, and I think that's the key. It's the old know when to say when.
There's nothing wrong with leaving wanting more,
No, that's exactly right.
Well, I'll start out with what has to be the longest running show on both of our lists. You can currently watch almost 700 episodes on the Disney Plus. And I feel like I've never had it. I mean, I know it started after I was born, but I feel like I've never had a day in my life where The Simpsons has a big part of my life. So I got to go with The Simpsons. Marge, Maggie, Homer, Lisa, Bart, Santa's Little Helper, Snowball 1, Snowball 2. Just an incredible cast of characters, Krusty, side characters, McBain. I mean, you go through the list, and the beautiful thing about The Simpsons, and almost every show on my list that qualifies this, does this, is that I have this book of Simpsons math jokes. And the jokes are like advanced physics, advanced calculus. And they were able to have, in the same scene, you have Homer getting hit in the ball, the balls with, with the football. And then you have this advanced physics joke that probably 0.2% of the population is going to understand. And you have a literary reference. And they were just able to weave all these layers of humor into every single episode. Besides being a wonderful spoof on family and the family sitcom of old.
Yeah, I mean, great use of sarcasm, great use of satire, and it never got stale. And they were able to continually grow and add things, and it never seemed like they were just throwing something to throw together. There was no throwaway episodes of The Simpsons.
Now, people have argued the last few seasons, which has been nice with the Disney Plus with every episode. Because I'm currently on season 4 of my rewatch. I just watch a couple every couple of days or whatever it is. Sort of my late night TV show. And once you hit about halfway through season 3 to about season 8, are just all killer. I mean, that's when they were at their peak and just really cruising. And even now, it's not what it used to be. And I mean, after a while, you've seen the same characters. You can only do so many things with them. But it's still, I think it's become an underrated show currently. As people are just, they compare it to the shows of old, but it's it's still just an absolutely fantastic show. And again, it's on Disney Plus every episode.
And one thing that blows me away is it's on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
That's what really blows me away.
It's the reason I bought Disney Plus.
And, you know, Disney's definitely stepping out of their comfort zone. But if you're going to pay a subscription for something, it needs to be more than targeted at one member of the family.
Right. And you've got...
And I think that's what they saw here, that they saw they'd have more success if they had a true mix of entertainment options that would appeal to the whole family. So
yeah, if you got Marvel...
I give credit for that.
Yeah, you got Marvel, Star Wars, all the Disney catalog, the old TGIF shows like Boy Meets World. You have a number of Neo Geo, nature documentaries, and The Simpsons. I mean, they did a good job.
Yeah.
A real good job. So, gotta go Simpsons.
Okay. I'm going to go another one that's not both our list, Justified.
Oh, it is, definitely.
And we've talked about it before on the show, but it's my favorite antagonist and protagonist where they're equal. And you see the value of each one, and you like each one in their own way. And they play off each other so well. And it's just such a well-done series. And that was an FX series.
It was.
And Timothy, that's what really endeared Timothy Oliphant to me. He played the Raylan character as well as I could ever have imagined. And I read a couple of stories after I started watching. And it's just so much fun to read the story thinking about Timothy Oliphant being the character.
Yeah, the Elmore Leonard novels are just,
They're really good. This was really well done. I mean, so sometimes it's so hard. And Stephen King's a great example. I mean, Stephen King's had his hits and misses with people adapting his work. But this was really, really a great adaptation. Great acting. Serious and funny in every episode. Great, foils, characters to play off each other, clown characters. But serious characters, I mean, and really, really well done. I mean, it's hard to imagine something I enjoyed. I'm actually going to go back and watch that. If this continues another month, I'll go back and watch them all in order again.
And just a little shout out, I'll just throw this out there. Because when you were having knee surgery and I was in grad school, I bought the DVDs to your house, and that's where we got introduced to the show.
Yep.
But the first season, the pilot is amazing. And then there's 4 or 5 episodes where the show is sort of finding its footing. And they're not bad episodes by any stretch. But seasons 2, 3, and 4 are just absolutely, in the beginning and end of season 1. There's a little bit in season 1 where it may seem like a different kind of show. It's more of a, baddie of the week. But it moves past that and becomes just, it's still good, but it becomes phenomenal after that. But just don't think that it's not a typical baddie of the week. It just does that for about 4 or 5 episodes after the pilot, and then it really finds its footing. So,
and again, one of the most satisfying final episodes of any television I've ever watched.
Yes.
And that's hard to say.
All right, my next one, I believe, is on Netflix currently. It's definitely on BBC4, and I own every episode. I'm a big BBC fan. I've always loved the British humor, and that's the IT Crowd. You got Roy, Moss. It's such a funny, goofy. I mean, it's a very British show. Like, it's absurd, and it's shot in a very bright color, and it looks very, you can tell you're watching a TV show. It's not gritty by any stretch, but the chemistry that those guys have on screen, the humor is just absolutely phenomenal. And Moss is one of my all-time favorite TV characters. It's Richard Ayoade, who I read a number of books on. He's also a director. He's been on a ton of things that I like. Like, he's actually a brilliant, brilliant man. And he's just so, so funny. And in this character, like, it's one of those perfect casting where it's him, taken to an extreme, which I think is always the best way to cast somebody, where you're giving, they already look the part, and they sort of are the part, and then you just take them, to that extreme to bring it to the humor. And it's a show I probably watched every episode at least 20 times. And it just never gets old for me. Absolutely just love it.
Good.
So
I've not seen that one. I'll have to check that one out.
Yeah, and Chris O'Dowd is the Irishman on that show, who's become,
Chris O'Dowd.
he's become much bigger in the United States now, if you're wondering who who the other people on that show are. And Matt Smith, who's in What We Do in the Shadows, which is also another fun show. So, yeah.
Okay. I'm going to go True Detective, seasons 1 and 3.
It's a good call.
Season 2 was, as much as I love Vince Vaughn, season 2 was so disappointing for some of the reasons we've already talked about, is that season 1 was so great, and there was such a demand then to create new content that they rushed into it and just didn't do a good job.
And you had different people behind the scenes this time because the writer and the director weren't ready to go. And, they just thought they could, bring in another good writer and sort of crank it out. But like you said, they cranked it out so fast that it kind of fell on its face.
Season 1, though, with Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson, they just played so well together. They complement each other. Their roles complement each other so well. And it was just unbelievable. I could hardly wait each week for Sunday night for that to come back on. I mean, it was like so. And that was, that was as much like episodic TV as anything. I would wait until Sunday night at 9 o'clock and just make sure I had no commitments so I could follow that story. And then season 3, a lot of people were confused because there was a lot of time lapse and time travel and back and forth.
Yeah.
But they did such a good job, and the acting and the makeup men were phenomenal. And it's just, you need to watch that one as well. Skip 2, watch 1 and 3, you won't be disappointed.
Okay. Well, for my next pick, I'll stick with HBO. And this show has been promoted so many times that it's become a meme, where it's the snobby TV guy going, "Have you not watched The Wire yet?" But honestly, have you not watched The Wire yet? Because The Wire is so good. It's one of those shows where if you read about the creator, he had a 5-season arc. The show is 5 seasons. And from a writing standpoint, it's one of those shows that makes you feel like if you're somebody that does write and wants to get in the business, it makes you realize like how good writing can be. It's a show that sort of throws you back and questions whether you can even do it that well.
Was George Pelecanos the writer?
He was one. Yeah, he was on there. But it's just one of those, like, it's set in Baltimore. It involves the drug trade. You've got, your standard, Idris Elba, and it's the first introduction when doing the perfect American Baltimore accent. And, the guy gets out of jail, wants his place back in the drug ring. There's corrupt cops, corrupt politicians. You've got really well-developed characters like McNulty and everybody else that goes through. But the one thing about this show that, and you have Omar, who, has become, a meme himself. Omar, as the gay drug dealer who kills other drug dealers and robs other drug dealers, almost like a weird Robin Hood. But the thing about this show is everything pays off. It might take 3 seasons, but if you see something in season 1, it's going to pay off. It's not just there for show. It's not there because they thought it would be a cool scene. It's not there as filler. Like there's something, it's going to pay off at some point in the watching the show. The writing is just so tight in that way. And and again, I realize it's the show that everyone's like, have you not seen The Wire yet? But it really is that good. So you should watch The Wire. And I believe right now it's one of the shows, I know HBO is doing that free streaming for some of their channels, or some of their shows.
Yep.
And I think it's one of the shows that's free to stream. So, that's a great thing. I know HBO is doing it partially to, get your taste buds ready for HBO Max launching, I think, next month.
Yep, it's one of the shows on there.
It's one of the shows on there. And I know that, going back to the Disney Plus thing, one of the things HBO is doing, besides having their amazing catalog of shows, HBO also, I think, landed Friends as part of their package. So they can be their big tentpole, 10-season sitcom that people can binge through. But it's, again, I know it's a little bit cliche to say The Wire, but if you watch The Wire, you understand how good The Wire is. So.
Okay. Similar to that, exposed as part of this new HBO Max, The Sopranos, which really probably, the success of that probably contributed to the development of a lot more miniseries, or a lot more serial TV on HBO. A good guy, a bad guy that you kind of viewed as a good guy, but whenever you start really, really liking him, then he would do something and really bring it back to perspective that he really was a bad guy. The characters were likable, but they were also people that you really didn't want to be around, and you saw them take over sporting goods stores, and create divorces in families, and hit people. And I mean, it was powerful television.
Oh,
and again, really, really well done. Great casting. I don't know how the Italian American community feels about it. They're upset the way they were portrayed. If they're proud, probably a little bit of both. And again, a final episode that a lot, some people really didn't like. I kind of liked because it left it for me to decide what happened there. And
I think people have come around. I know at the time, like almost
every
every
people were not happy with the ending.
and this isn't really a spoiler because I think it's been around forever, but the screen literally goes to black with no sound, and it lasts that way for a good 30 seconds before you get the credits. And I think a lot of people just thought their cable went out, was the most people's story. And I don't know how else you would have done it, but I think people have come to appreciate it. But I think in the moment, thinking that their cable went out, and then it was just like, wait, what? So.
Now, I will tell you, it's a long series.
Yes.
So if you're going to binge it, you're probably going to need what I call it, a mental gargling in between some episodes that you might need to watch some comedy to break it up a little bit. I wouldn't probably sit there and watch 8 hours of The Sopranos in a row.
No, it's a heavy
I
show.
would probably figure out a way to break it up. Same with The Wire. I would do the same thing. Whereas, because they don't have the comedic element like a Justified offers you to kind of, you see some other things that kind of lessen the pain.
Yes. Well, here's a show you can watch in between. One of my more recent shows on the list. It's actually a network show, which I'm usually not a big network show person, but The Good Place, with America's Treasure, Ted Danson, Kristen Bell, and everyone in that cast is just perfectly cast. And again, it's a show if you appreciate really good writing. It's a show that it's only 4 seasons. I think it's probably less than. Maybe it's 50, 60 episodes top, so it's not a ton of show. But it's one of the sitcoms that I laughed every episode. I probably had, those little choke up moments at least every 2 or 3 episodes. And somehow, despite being a sort of pseudo heavy, it's clearly, it's very much a sitcom and a comedy, but it's a heavy topic. It's about sort of, what happens when you die. They somehow stuck the landing. And as we were getting near that last couple of episodes, I had my friend I work with at work, we talked about the show. We were kind of worried, like, we got this, it wouldn't affect, we still love the show, but we're like, they're not going to be able to make this work. And somehow they're able to pull it off. But like I said, it's a show that it's very poignant, it's very beautiful, but it's also very silly and very funny. Ted Danson is always great. I don't think he's ever been bad in anything I've seen him in. I've come to really appreciate him over the years. And Kristen Bell, she's sort of America's sweetheart on some level. And the rest of the cast. Like I said, it's just a really, really well done show. It's got a little bit of absurdity. It's got some, it has a lot of philosophy jokes on multiple levels. So, again, it's one of those shows with multi-levels in every scene, so you're going to find something you like.
Awesome. Trying to debate where I want to go next. I'm going to go 30 for 30.
Oh, a docuseries.
Which was ESPN taking on some people and some topics and really going on a deep dive and telling a really compelling story. And my all-time favorite one was the one about Marcus Dupree, because it shows him from high school to where he is now and follows him all the way through. And it's one of those tales that you could say it's an American tragedy, but here's a guy that's happy with his wife, happy with the way his life turned out. But if you look at just the typical sports story, then here's a guy who had it all and got hurt and ended up he never got playing really in the NFL except when he was already broken down. But if you saw, they also show some pictures of him in high school. And the only way I can describe him playing high school football is if you've ever watched Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids. It would be like Fat Albert running with the ball and everybody trying to tackle him, and they're all blowing in the breeze, hanging onto his shirt. I've never seen more ridiculous high school football highlights than that episode. And they did some great things on gambling and scandals in sport, different people, and it just was really, really, really well done. I really enjoyed the 30 under 30, 30 for 30, which then gave a birth to a number of other little stories like that on HBO.
Well,
that's one of the ones I would recommend.
I feel like HBO is getting a lot of love on the show, but I'm going to give it a slight bit more. The next show I'm going to talk about was a show that I debated heavily whether I would put it on my list. Because if you ask me right now what I want to rewatch, the answer would be no. But if you asked me any time during seasons 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 what my favorite show of all time is, it would have been Game of Thrones.
Okay, yeah, I know you were conflicted about this.
I was conflicted about this because, I mean, it's never a bad show. What I would say is, for the first 5 seasons, they had source material to work from. And I think their egos were in check. And I think that they stuck to it seemed like it was such a tightly well-written, considering it's a show that involves dragons and magic, which, some people have a hard time contemplating, and dealing with on a show. They were able to portray it in a way that made sense within the world. And all the characters were very unique, and they behaved they always talk about writing, you have a character Bible. And the character Bible you can write before you even write your script. And you pick your character and you say what your character is going to be like, how they react in certain situations, what happened to them up to the point where we're meeting them. So that when anything happens to them in the story, you as the writer know how they would react to it based on where they came from. And they stuck to that so beautifully for the first 5 seasons. And you had all these moments where you were shocked, you were entertained, but you were also just shocked that happened. You couldn't believe that it happened. And around season 6, they ran out of source material. And I think, and this isn't a knock on B.D. Weiss and Wendehoff, they've done more than I'm probably ever going to do a career. I hope it's not true. I hope I get to go somewhere and get to do some creative stuff at some point on my own. But I think people were blowing so much smoke up their ass that they sort of lost sight of what they were doing, and they started, bringing in celebrity cameos like Ed Sheeran and some other things. And seemed like the show used to be about the journey, and all of a sudden the show, because I read a really good article, all of a sudden the show became about the end points. So rather than, in the first couple seasons, I know it sounds boring to some people, but it may take 2 characters 7 episodes to get to the next destination. But it was the things that happened to them along the way. It was their interaction that made the show so brilliant. And then in everything that took place along those 7 episodes to get them there made sense. And then somewhere between 6 and 8, the last 2, 6 and 7, the last 2 seasons, however you want to call it, they started just writing 2 points. And it's like, we need this point to happen, so let's just get them there. And they sort of would have characters behave the way they would normally behave. And it just got a little bit sloppier and a little less crisp. And, all of a sudden, you had TV cliches, like anyone that knows Star Trek knows there's the red shirts. And whenever Kirk would go on a mission and he would bring 2 guys in red shirts, you knew those guys weren't coming back. And Game of Thrones was never about that. Like, every character death meant something. Everybody on screen was somebody, Then all of a sudden it's like, okay, our main characters are leaving and they're bringing these 2 people we've never seen before. So you knew they were going to die. And it just became a much more cliched show. But it's still an absolutely brilliant show. The first 5 seasons are so phenomenal. And again, I don't mind where it ended. I just mind how they got to the ending. I just thought they got really lazy and sloppy for the last season and a half. And I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
But certainly worth a watch. And I think part of it is the first 5 seasons were so incredible that your expectations were just so high that any slight change became disappointing.
All right. I'm going to go back to HBO again, but this one only was a 2-season story. It was called Rome. And it was historical fiction. So some people say it was like if the Sopranos lived in ancient Rome, which was a story, but it was really the real characters of ancient Rome, Caesars and the emperors and the generals, and the real occurrences that happened, told by the eyes of a enlisted man and an officer that were traveling through at the same time and going through, and it was just a really, really enjoyable story. I can't even imagine what the cost per episode was. It had to be really, really high. But it was on for 2 seasons. It's on HBO on demand. But it's well worth watching, especially if you like history and you like a really good historical fiction with real history in it. It would be my recommendation.
Okay. My next show is one that definitely won't be for everybody. I'll just put that out there. But it does have an 8.3 with over 19,000 reviews on IMDb. It's another BBC show. It's called The Mighty Boosh. It's sort of like a weird, trippy adult Pee-wee's Playhouse. Is probably the easiest way I can put it for American audiences.
Okay.
It stars Julian Barnett and Noel Fielding. They're a comedy team. And they do some really, really weird stuff. People might know Noel Fielding from the last couple seasons of Bake Off. He actually was one of the hosts of Bake Off. He's got long hair. He dresses like David Bowie or any sort of weird 70s movie star or 70s like rock star. Richard Ayoade, who again came up before, is also one of the writers of this show. Matt Berry, who's on What We Do in the Shadows and has just a tremendous voice and was on the IT Crowd. I mean, there's clearly a lot of crossover between some of the stuff I like. But this show is just it's so funny and so comforting. And it's very weird and silly and out there. And again, not for, but like I said, the people that it's one, I think it's probably one of those you'll love it or you just won't get it kind of shows. And there's nothing wrong if you don't get it. But for me, it's one of those shows too. Like if I'm ever a little bit out or down, I can just put that show on. It just makes me happy. It started as a show on BBC Radio. And I actually own all the radio series on disc too, just because I liked it that much. But again, it's really low. It looks like people put together the sets with stuff they had at their house. And it's just very, very weird, silly show. But I find it absolutely brilliant and comforting, and I love it.
Okay. I'm going to give you another one. It's not for everybody because it will make you uncomfortable and will scare you. And it would be Mindhunters, which was on Amazon Prime.
Oh, yeah.
Two seasons thus far, right, Jay?
Yeah. And unfortunately, the third, fourth, and fifth seasons, which were apparently already outlined out, are sort of up in the air right now because they gave David Fincher a bunch of, besides obviously what's happening now, but they gave Fincher a bunch of money to go make the movie he wanted to make. So he released everybody from their contract. So hopefully we are going to get more. But the two seasons themselves are just phenomenal. So.
And the thing I would tell you about is that, it's how the behavioral science unit at Quantico was formed, by studying serial killers. And so the Mindhunters go in and interview serial killers that are in jail. And I have to tell you, if you watch an episode, the people that they're portraying really exist. So look at the actor and then go online and look up the real guy, and you'll be blown away as to how eerie the resemblance is and how much scarier that will make this for you.
Oh, yeah. The guy that plays Ed Kemper, he deserves it. I know he never got one, but he should have gotten every award. He is so good.
And then the scariest thing about that is that he actually reads audiobooks. So you could actually end up with an audiobook read by Ed Kemper.
Yes.
Which might really scare me.
Because hearing his clinical sort of self-aware breakdown of why he did what he did is just terrifying. Like his level of intelligence is very clear.
Off the chain.
And the show itself is just really well done. Beautiful characters are really interesting. Like it's just really, really good.
Well, Jason, it's obvious at this point in the show that this is going to be a two-parter.
Yes.
Because we're not going to get through it. Why don't you do another one? And let's see where we are.
Okay. Well, since we've gone a little heavy, I'm going to go back to one of my favorite comedies, an NBC show based on an NBC show, and that's 30 Rock, the Tina Fey show. That's just, again, it's one of those shows, Alec Baldwin, Tracy Morgan, I forget Jenna's name, Pete. It's full of just amazing, amazing actors. They do a great job of, even though the Lemon is clearly, the Tina Fey character is clearly the central point of the show, it involves its side characters so well. And again, every episode probably has, in a 22-minute episode, you're getting well over 100 jokes. So every time you rewatch, you might get a joke you didn't get the first time. And if you don't know, 30 Rock is sort of based on, it's a sketch comedy sitcom. It's based on a sitcom or a sketch comedy show. So it's sort of, there's some, it's the Who, Tracy Morgan is based on. Some people say it's Eddie Murphy. It's just accumulation of sort of like working on a late night sketch comedy show. But it's absurd humor, it's fun humor, and you can just fly through that show. That's a show you can watch a ridiculous amount of episodes every night, laugh your ass off, and then all of a sudden realize you watched way too many episodes.
Interestingly enough, I just added that to my list of shows to binge on.
Oh, I think you have to. I mean, it's just it's so good.
All right, I'll close this off with every time I find somebody that's never seen the show, I am incredulous. Like, I cannot believe you could have gone through the 1990s and not watched Seinfeld. But yet, I meet people that have never seen an episode of Seinfeld.
That are in the age demographic?
Yes. And it just blows me away. A show, again, in 22 minutes, how they can have 3 or 4 storylines, each unique about one of the different characters, and then bring it to a believable close every week. And the characters are, they're likable and they're not likable. They just had brilliant writing. I mean, absolute brilliant writing. And the characters that they created, like the Soup Nazi and Bubble Boy, and some of these things are just amazingly how they're done. And I never feel, if I'm surfing through and there's an episode of Seinfeld, I always stop and I'll watch Seinfeld because I know that no matter what's going to go on, I'm going to get a couple laughs before I move on.
And as you said, it's not just, you watch other sitcoms and you'll have, your A plot, your B plot, and your C plot. Not to get, that's a very technical, but whatever. And oftentimes everybody's story sort of just ends. Every episode of Seinfeld, somehow, despite the fact that you wouldn't think, their stories all end up intertwining by the end of it in just this beautiful, perfect bow. So it's not just like, Elaine is over here and we see her story has a conclusion. Somehow her ridiculous story intertwines with Jerry's story and George's story and Kramer's story to some absolutely ridiculous ending. In just such a brilliant, brilliant way that other sitcoms just have not been able to do. Other than a show, because I had Seinfeld on my list along, and I put /Curb. HBO's Curb Your Enthusiasm, which is Larry David's continuation.
And as much as I like his writing, I cannot stand him on camera.
Yeah, I know.
It's one thing. I've tried to watch Curb Your Enthusiasm a number of times. I just do not like the Larry David character, who I know is the basis for the George Costanza character.
Exactly. But
who also I really didn't like.
If you didn't feel like Seinfeld concluded, I think it's season 7 of Curb Your Enthusiasm. They reunite the entire cast of Seinfeld, and the whole thing is about them doing one more episode. And you almost get like an extra episode of Seinfeld mixed in, because all the characters are back, all the actors are back playing themselves, but also playing their roles, and it's pretty great. So, yeah.
All right, so Jason and I will finish this up next week. I'm glad we're doing this because I hope that some of you, if we can give you several hours of enjoyment from listening to us and then listening to following up on some of our recommendations. I know a lot of people are running out of things. I hope we're giving you some things and getting you excited about how to spend some time over the next couple of weeks, because it's not going to get any better. It's going to be the same next week. This is like Groundhog Day. The next 3 weeks are going to be the 3 weeks you just had.
Yes.
But stay safe and healthy.
All right, so until next week.